Right, thank you all for attending. So this is our sixth user group event for the user experience, user interface, and accessibility user group within Power Platform. And this is a special event. We're trying something new for this time. We've got our festive event, which is based in Australasia. And so for that, we've got Dani Cahill and Hamish Sheild from Australia and New Zealand, respectively. Yeah, let's move on from there. Oh, yeah, one thing I also wanted to mention was that we shared some social media stuff around this, and we shared an image that was mostly based around Australia. So I thought we would pay something back to New Zealand by just including some New Zealand photos and reminding people how beautiful New Zealand is. So we've got a bit more balance there. But yeah, New Zealand's a beautiful country, and you can see that from those. So I'll just quickly go through the Microsoft Event Code of Conduct. So basically, what we want to get from all of this is that we want to be inclusive, we want to be kind, and we want everyone to have a nice time. If you do have any issues with anything that comes up during our events or outside of our events within our group, you can reach out to us. So to Anna, who's on the call here, Kat, or myself, or you can reach out to Microsoft and their contact details are here. And we'll be releasing this on YouTube in due course, so you can also get the details from there if I'm not giving you enough time to get them right now. So as I say, we want to be very inclusive. So we've just got some ground rules here just to basically be welcoming to everyone, positive, friendly, respectful, and considerate. Feel free to express your viewpoints, but do so in a nice manner. Consider the fact that we will have differences in opinion and respect other people's opinions. We do encourage questions and reactions during the meeting. So feel free to use the chat, feel free to raise your hand, and you'll be given a chance to speak during a Q&A. And yeah, let us know either in the chat here or separately what you want to hear about, what you want from future events, what times work for you, because we've been testing out different times as well. And yeah, just generally give us some feedback because it's always going to help us. So thank you. So just some housekeeping rules. We're going to record the call. As I say, we'll put it on YouTube, ideally within 24 hours of it completing. You're welcome to turn your cameras on. If that's not available right now, then we'll turn it on. We'll keep you muted for the time being, but then we'll give you an opportunity to speak as well at some point during the Q&A. And yeah, feel free to use your reactions to let us know what you think of how everything's going. So also we've got a call for speakers out. It's permanently out. We have monthly calls always on the 11th of the month. We would love to have new speakers covering all of the different topics of Power Platform. So it's a wide range of things, as long as it's geared towards user experience, user interface design, or accessibility, or even all three, and Power Platform, of course. So the presentations that we've got today, as I mentioned earlier, we've got Dani Cahill, who is talking about UI UX tricks for model-driven apps. And then after that, we've got Hamish Sheild giving us an introduction into prototyping for the user experience. Unfortunately, Dani wasn't able to make it to this particular event. Just at the last minute, he had a client meeting that came up. He'll explain it more in his video, but yeah, he would have loved to be here and just simply couldn't because he's traveling at the moment. So hopefully everything's going well for him on the train or wherever he is right now. Yeah, so we'll move on to if I stop sharing my screen, I'll bring up what's happened is Dani has recorded a video for us, and I'll play that back to us, and then we can discuss it afterwards, or we can go straight into Hamish's presentation. So yeah, this is only a short video, only 9 minutes long, but I've already watched a bit of it, not all of it, and it's really interesting content. So yeah, let's watch this, and then we can discuss it afterwards and talk about if we have any questions or things we want to mention about the video. So thanks.
Hi all, and good evening from the other side of the world. Thank you for your interest in the Power Platform UX UI user group. And the first thing really I want to say is apologies for not being able to be in person for this call. I planned it ahead actually to be able to make it. Unfortunately, I had to travel to another city last minute. So it's actually 8 a.m. for me here in Australia, 8 in the morning. So I'm somewhere walking to a station or on the train as we speak, where the connection is a little bit iffy and I couldn't make it live. I'll do my best, however, to make it up and make it as live as possible, effectively. In a sense, the good thing is I'll be able to show you a few live scenarios that where I'm using some of those UI UX tips, because by recording this, I can actually blur some of the logos and blur some of the data. But those are really tips that I use on my day-to-day project. So let's get started with tip number 1. So the first tip I want to show you is how I started to use PowerFX formulas to enhance some of my UI. So the scenario really is, if you have a main record, let's call it an application record, and then you have details stored in child records, right? Sometimes when you review the details of every details application, effectively, you might need some data visually present from the main record, from the parent record, right? And look, you can use tabs if you have multiple big screens and so forth. But effectively, one of my clients was really having some issues because they needed a lot of details in that record, and they still needed to see quite a lot of information from the parent record where they were assessing the details. And you can think of scenario where you have a lot of information coming into a main record, and then you open the child records, and then you kind of lose the sight of some of the details from the parent record. So there's many things you can do, right? You can replicate the fields, you can use maybe the form component and so forth. And then what I want to show you here, it's a kind of a third option, right? Where effectively, let me show you the live demonstration here, right? So effectively, so let me show you how that looks like in real life. So let's say we have our parent record. Let's say that's a credit application. And then you have details of the applications here. You can also see that is the field I'm talking about. So it's one field that has, it's a formula, PowerFX formula field that has concatenated data. So I can display here in the header way more information, because otherwise it's kind of limited to only 4 fields. And in this case, I can concatenate way more information in the header. And then as well, what I leverage this for is that if I go to any of the child records that where effectively someone reviewing the child records might need that information, I can also point to, using the formula, I can point to the parent record and get that information again to kind of have a consistent header, right? So how is this done? So if I go now to my the Power Apps, effectively, let me zoom in a little bit here. So how that's done, if I go to Power Apps and I go to effectively that field, you can see the field is labeled with the different other fields that I'm showing. So the field is effectively labeled this way, and I'm using a single line. I'm using a PowerFX formula column effectively, where I can concatenate different values coming from my parent record and then concatenating the field. So that will be on the child record. That same formula on effectively the main parent record. If I wanted to show you that information on the parent record, you effectively remove the reference to the parent record, and you can show effectively the concatenated value. So I found this solution quite useful for my client, because effectively they could have a consistent header in the UI where whether they have the main record and then they navigate to child records, the header is kind of consistent, and the header also displays key information from the parent record. The second scenario really I wanted to show you was some enhancements to the timeline. So by default, the timeline is a little bit, if you see a normal timeline, that's a timeline that you see normally. So you have a list of records, whether that's, appointment or task, you can see them here, and you can control the layout of the timeline using the cards form. However, one of my clients they were coming from another system, right? And that other system actually did nicely the layout of the task and activity kind of a little bit more, was a bit more clearer. So basically what they ask us is whether we could enhance the timeline with predefined fields here and a little bit more formatting, right? So I did play a little bit with the cards and the usual fields, and I couldn't really find anything that could respond to such layout. So effectively what I did is we created a new field called timeline description, which is a rich text field. So basically a rich text field that shows effectively, here you can see bold, title of the different field, and you can use all kind of HTML styling if you wanted. You can, well, additional colors, you can use additional spacing here, but basically the idea is that you have a field which is a rich text field, and then on change of any other fields on your activity, you run a Power Automate or your sync workflow, whatever, that effectively formats the values into a formatted HTML rich text formatting, and then displays the HTML effectively instead of any other fields, right? So this way you can kind of achieve a way of displaying child activities or child records on a company in a kind of a card manner, where you can see almost like the cards of each of the activities, right? So how this is being achieved, if I show you now how it's done. So effectively the card itself, if I open the card, you will see that the card has that timeline description field, and then effectively that timeline description field is being, so in this case we are using a sync workflow that effectively updates. You can see here the sync workflow effectively updates, that timeline description with some HTML values. And as I said, we were kind of still quite limited with the formatting, but using this tip, you can format your timeline or activity description with any kind of HTML styling, really. And the last really thing that you have to do then is on the form, on the parent form with your timeline, what you effectively need to do is, or what we did effectively here, is that we enable the timeline to be always expanded. So if I just show you the timeline, what I did is, here, if I go to advanced, we can see here that the expand all record by default, which means that effectively all your records will be expanded by default. And you can see here, these are all, tasks, company notes, whatever. So they are all nicely expanded. So yeah, so if you want to enhance a little bit the UI of the timeline for your clients, especially if clients have, previous expectations or want to have something a little bit more formatted and more colorful, or a bit more little bit more styling on the timeline, you can use that trick. There is a bit more maintenance down the track, but actually for this client, this was a significant improvement for them. They were all very happy. So I guess the effort to make this work versus the reward really paid off in this case. So yeah, well, I hope that you like those two tips. Again, apologies for not being in person with you on this one. And enjoy the rest of the presentation. I'm sure Hamish has a lot of amazing things to show you as well. So see you in the next one. Bye.
Thanks to Dani. That was really interesting. What I would like to do is I'd like to open up the microphones in case anyone would like to discuss what we've just seen.
That was really good. I love that tip on the timeline. Such a simple solution and quite effective.
It's creative ways to change the interface, isn't it?
It is. It is, definitely. It is.
Yeah, I love the PowerFX formula column. I find it so useful. I wish that we could use it on the primary name column as well. That would be really nice. Like if we wanted to automatically update the primary name, at the moment we have to use a plugin for it. It'd be lovely to be able to just use a PowerFX column on it.
Maybe one day.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or we'll be using low-code plugins which are now PowerFX functions. Sorry, Hamish,
I thought that was sorry. No, I thought that was say a really creative way of using the interface, right? And those are two things that I know the PowerFX column one, but the timeline, that's something I would have never thought of, right? So it kind of like shows you just the power of the community and diverse thinking, right? And so it's pretty cool to see something that I've never seen before. And so, yeah, thank you, Dani, for sharing that. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. You always pick up new things, don't you? Whenever you go and watch, go to an event or watch sessions, even if you think, oh yeah, I know pretty much everything on this topic, there's usually something you'll pick up. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever think to try to apply the HTML into like the description and for that to actually work as well. So no, that's yeah, mind blowing.
I wonder how far you can take it with some funky HTML.
Challenge
Probably very far.
challenge accepted, Charles. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be interesting whether you could, color code the background per activity or, things like that. Then I've just had a client recently, just complain to me about how hard, they've got a timeline on a contact record and there's just, there's emails and stuff everywhere and they can't sort through all the information. And even though that timeline highlights with the Copilot thing helps a bit, it's still, they find it impossible to see through everything. So I thought Dani's solution looks really clean, but it'd be awesome to see if someone can take it a bit further, right, to make it even better. Yeah.
Yeah, the default
absolutely.
timeline is very
Right.
compressed, isn't it? There's a lot of information to take in.
Yes, and then like today I had a user contacted me that they couldn't see like within their timeline, it was only like notes and attachments. And they had a problem because they couldn't like access the attachments, and it was as simple, like from my perspective, as it wasn't expanded by default. Probably they accidentally click it and they didn't realize it because it's not really intuitive, because you have that chevron pointing to the right. When you want to expand something, like naturally you were like wanting to, pointing down, so that the kind of the idea of expanding, but no, it's to the right. So yeah, overall the timeline, it's not really intuitive, and that whole experience. So yeah, I hope Microsoft can do something about that eventually.
Yeah, I agree. I find every project I have to customize that timeline quite heavily. Even just things like the default sorting is by modified date. So if you, an email may come in, but if you modify that email record, because one example is, say if it, it tries to link a contact records to the to and the from, and if it can't do that, you can go and update and create that record. Then it sets the modified on the email. That email might have been sent like 2 months ago, but it looks like it was sent recently. So just things like that kind of blows my mind, how confusing it can be if you don't know the gaps in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
It can be a proper challenge for everyone in the community. Go and redesign the timeline for Microsoft.
Someone's probably
That'd be
already done
awesome.
it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm sure. Or someone on the call will try to pick it up. But yeah, it would be good to kind of, as I said, overall enhance that experience.
Yeah.
Dani is on the good track. So yes.
Yeah, he's a legend. And
He's
on to another
absolutely.
legend, which is Hamish. So yeah, Hamish, are you ready to share and depart your wisdom?
Yeah, sure. Yep, we
Thank
can.
you.
And
Awesome.
what I'm going to do today is I like to be very interactive with my sessions. So I'm going to put into the chat, and this is completely optional, by the way, but it will make it for a better experience for everyone. If even just a few people can jump into, there's a Miro board here. If you can jump into that, and there'll be some kind of interactive components here. So while it is a presentation, there's also, I guess I like getting information from you. So I'll be asking you to share your thoughts and ideas, and you don't have to come off mute. You can just type them onto these sticky notes on the board. So I can see people on the board, and what I'm going to do is I'll share my screen on Teams here for the recording. But for those of you who are in Miro, it's probably better just to have your Miro browser, in the browser open, and I'll guide you through experience as well. So instead of watching Teams, look at it in Miro, and it'll be the you'll probably understand what I mean once you get into it. It's a bit hard to describe here offline. So let me just share my screen quickly. There we go. Can everyone, if you're on the Teams call, can you see that my screen sharing?
Yeah. Yep, looks
Cool. Okay. All good. Cool. So what I'm going to do is then I'm going to put this into presentation mode, and it should, if you're in Miro with me, whoops, it should ask you to join my presentation. Sorry, it skipped halfway through. And I can just see I've done a little bit of a mistake here as well. Here we go. Okay, so everyone should be now. Now let me just restart that, sorry. You should be on my title frame, title slide in Miro, is that right? Yep, cool.
That's right.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Thank you for accommodating this time zone. I think it's really, really neat. But I do recognize a lot of names from the other side of the world. So thank you for joining me so late at night as well. And hopefully with a few Kiwis and Aussies this side with us. But it's really, I think this is a really good user group. I think the topics and everything are amazing, right? And so important for, I guess, yeah, the work that we do with Power Apps and Dynamics as well. So thank you for having this user group and enabling people like myself and Dani to talk about these topics. So what I'm going to be doing today is a bit of an introduction to prototyping for user experience. And I think, you probably, everyone on this call is probably of the same frame of mind that user experience is really important to our Power Platform solutions. I don't know how many projects I've been in or projects you see where the user experience is a bit of an afterthought, and then the user adoption is poor, the testing is poor, the application solution doesn't actually get used, and then it never delivers the business benefits that it hoped to, right? So I feel like user experience is such a key part to all of this. And if our users are using the application, which means they like it, they've got a good user experience, then you're way more likely to get those business benefits out of it if people are using it. So I feel like this is such a key topic. And one of the tools that I use to help design a good user experience, because I think a lot of us aren't user experience designers, we're not from that sort of background, right? That prototyping is a really good tool and a good way to get users to tell you what is a good user experience for them, without having to have a really deep knowledge of user experience, techniques and theory and all that sort of thing as well. So this is going to be a very practical guide to prototyping for Power Platform solutions. So for those who are on Miro with me, if you're new to Miro, and a few of you might be, it's basically a digital whiteboard, and it has this really cool facilitation thing where I'll take you through a journey, right? And so every time I move the screen, it'll bring you along with me, and then there'll be some slides where you can interact with those as well. But if you can get lost a little bit, and so if you do get lost, or you can actually move around the board independent of me as well, and feel free to do that. But if you do stray away, there'll be a little button down the bottom that says return to Hamish next to your toolbar. And I can see people have found the toolbar because you've got your reactions going, which is cool. And then if you rejoin or lose me completely, you'll see a join button at the top right as well. So always click on that again to get back to where I am. Okay, let's get into it. So I want to start off by just doing a quick poll of your experience of using Miro. And I know people have different levels of experiences. Some people are going for it already, and the person who put the dot at the beginner end, you may actually be more experienced than you think. So you intuitively knew to grab a dot and place it on the line. So for those who are there, you can just put your mouse over a dot, select it, and drag it onto the line of where you are on the scale. Very good. So we're probably a lot of people at the beginning end. Do many people use other digital tools like this?
I use Mural, so quite similar.
Mural?
Yes.
Yeah, very similar, right? I think those two are very similar. Some people probably use Microsoft Whiteboard. I think it's a great tool, but it just doesn't quite have the facilitation experience that Miro and Mural have for these sorts of things. Cool. I can see a few people use Lucid as well. Nice, well done. Okay. So the next one of the other kind of key things about Miro or Mural or any of these digital whiteboards, we have these sticky notes. So what you want to do here is just to get you warmed up is I want you to select the sticky note and you can type your ideas on there. So I want you to answer the question, what has brought you to this workshop or this set of presentations today or this user group today? What are you hoping to get out of it? Cool, so people have got the idea here. New idea seems to be a popular topic. Some people are new to all of this. Very good. Get inspired. Very cool. So obviously, yeah, people are, obviously want to improve the UI UX of their model-driven apps or their apps in general, right? And I think that's, you're on the right track. And I feel like in terms of the skills, if you work with the Power Platform, if you're a consultant or a maker or whatever, I feel like this sort of skill set can help differentiate you in your work as well. Aside from the technical skills and knowing how to technically build apps, if you can bring some of these UX elements to it, it'll set you apart. And I think you just saw from Dani's example, right? That timeline, while it seems like it was not a big thing for his users and for his client, that was a big deal, right? And that would have made him look, a lot better in front of them. Right. So for those who don't know me, it's taken me a few guys to get to here, but my name is Hamish, obviously, and I'm from Auckland in New Zealand. I've been working with the Dynamics 365 space / Power Platform for about 15 years now as a consultant. And then more recently, in the last kind of 3 or 4 years, as a coach as well. So I specialize in what I call Power Platform design. So very much, that whole user experience space and using, I guess, what we call design thinking or human-centered design as an approach to Power Platform design. That's very much based around design applications that users like to use, which is obviously user experience as well. So as a consultant, I weave a lot of design thinking and what I show you today into the work I do with my clients. And then I also teach a lot of it as well. I have my own online course, and then I also work with a company called IDEO, who are IDEO is a design firm based in the States who are probably famous for making design thinking popular. And I am privileged to be on one of their teach a few of their courses as their teaching team. So it's a pretty cool company to work for. All right, so the next little interactive exercise I want you to do is take one of these dots and I want you to drag it into one of the boxes. And basically these are just common challenges that we face and the common challenges that prototyping can help us overcome as well. So I'd like you to grab a dot and drag it, and you can do 2 or 3 if you like, and drag it into the space where, which of these challenges are most challenging for you? Very good. You're all very, for a lot of people who are down at the baby or the beginner end of the scale for Miro, you're all very good at this, so well done. Thank you. And this makes it a lot more interesting for me and probably for everyone else, for everyone on the board here interacting. So really interesting results here. I think it's very common, this frustration with communication barriers between technical and non-technical stakeholders. super common. I think every time I do this exercise, that's one of the most voted ones, right? And I think prototyping is such a good tool to overcome those communication barriers. The other one, yeah, overwhelmed with the complexity of projects and uncertain how to gather requirements, understand user needs, and select solution components. So again, prototyping helps with all of these things, and I'll probably touch on a few of these as we go through that. Really interesting. We don't have many votes in the demotivated by failed UAT or fatigued from rework. In my experience, if you don't prototype, we don't share your solution with your users early on, can lead to poor UAT testing, and then obviously if the UAT testing is not going well, there's a lot of rework that comes after that. Okay, thank you for that. Right, so I'll just do a bit of theory now, and so prototyping is basically part of the design thinking toolkit. It's one of the, I guess, probably the most important tools of design thinking. And why I think design thinking is really important for Power Platform or business applications is that what we're really trying to do as makers or consultants, we're really trying to balance what is technically feasible, so what we can technically do with the platform, what is viable from a business perspective, so what is going to give a good ROI and not cost a lot, and then what is desirable from a human perspective, so what gives a really good user experience. And you've got to balance those three things. And in my experience, typically we're really good at the technical feasibility stuff. We're kind of okay with the business viability, depending on who our senior stakeholders are and how they're driving things. And then sometimes, the human or desirability but gets left to the end. It's a bit of an afterthought. So what I really encourage people to do is to start with the human aspect, start with the desirability, and then design solutions for the people, and then make sure, are they technically feasible? Are they viable from a business perspective? And I feel like that's a lot better way to approach things. And that's what design thinking is really all centered about, starting with the people you're going to design for and who'll be using your solution. Okay, another little exercise for you is I want you to take a dot and take 3 dots and place them on each of the scales around your prototyping experience. Have you got experience with it? How have you been trained on it? And how often do you use it in your Power Platform projects? Cool. I like, it's got a good range here. I like how we've got a couple of people using every Power Platform project. That's awesome to see. And what's not surprising, and this happens every time, right, is the amount of people who are self-trained in this and not trained by the employers. I just find it super interesting. Our employers typically give us lots of technical training, so the Microsoft Learn and the Microsoft certifications, but not a lot on these sorts of skills, which I find really interesting, because for me, these skills are the ones that will make a difference on any projects. Okay, thank you. Right, so let's have a quick look around what is prototyping, because I think there's a lot of different definitions out, and this is one that I like. But basically, it's a technique for creating great digital experiences by focusing on the users. So, looking at design thinking diagram I showed you there, you focus on the users and you gather feedback early from them and often. So involve them from the very start of the projects all the way through to the end, and continue to get their feedback and get their input. And a prototype as like an artifact or a thing, I think people think it has to be a certain thing, right? But it is basically anything that can get the idea out of your head and into something that people can experience and give feedback on. That's all it really is. And so, often if you were, say, writing requirements and they're in a big backlog, just a list of words, right? It's really hard for that idea in your head of how you interpret those words to get into the head of someone else and have that same vision of what it is. So a prototype is something that helps you give people something to experience and give feedback on. Right. And so why do we prototype? There's sometimes, when you build a prototype for a client, or for a stakeholder, and it looks quite good, and it's almost looks like it's almost finished, a finished product. Some people think that a prototype is something that you can quickly go from the prototype and then deploy it in production, and you're very close. Whereas prototyping is actually done for a few different reasons. It's you build to think. So as a consultant or a maker, building things and building prototypes helps you think about your solution. You build to learn. So this is where we build something for someone else and get them to use it, and they'll react to it and give you feedback, and you'll learn what is good about that design. And then building to communicate as well. So one of the best ways to communicate a design is to show people it and get them to interact with it, versus a document or user stories in Azure DevOps or anything like that. All right, so my next little activity is I want you to answer the question around what happens when you focus on the end user and gather feedback early and often. So when you do this, what are the outcomes that you get from it? And this is going back to prototyping as a definition. It's about involving the end user and gathering their feedback early and often. Cool. So yeah, better user adoption later. I like that because that typically, is true, right? Because you're getting them to give you feedback. They feel like they're building the solution with you. They're part of it, and that they're more likely to adopt it if they think they're part of the solution. Bad assumptions and designs are weeded out quickly. Yeah, so you definitely de-risk the projects by doing prototypes early and getting their feedback from the users early and often. Happy customers, I think, in my experience, definitely is another outcome of this. Yeah, better align with the visions in their heads. Very good. Yeah. And identifying issues early on. Very good. More likely to meet expectations. I like that one as well. Definitely. Okay, I've got to see a couple more people writing, but then I'll move on. Less free work later on. Yeah, definitely. I've definitely noticed that. Yeah, interesting. So I'm just looking at this person who's writing now around you hit the limitations of the Power Platform, which is probably quite a good thing, right? It's around, again, to this failing fast. You realize that all of a sudden, and we go back to that diagram where I had of design thinking where it's human desirability, technical feasibility. You find that it's not technically feasible, but you find it out now early on with prototyping rather than once you've gone live or you're close to going live. And I've heard of all sorts of projects where they don't involve the users early and often. They get close to go live. The product's been built. This has been a year building something, and they find that actually it doesn't do what the users want to do, and what the users want out of it, it's not technically possible. And that's a huge amounts of rework to try and get out of that situation. Okay, so prototyping is also, it's a process, right? It's not just building a thing. It's actually a whole process around it. And what we typically use prototyping for is we'll have a whole bunch of assumptions or questions or unknowns, and we want to learn about what that is. So first of all, we want to frame a question on basically what we want to learn. We then build a prototype to test that question. Then we then test that with users and get their feedback, and we learn more about what, and then we answer that question. And then once we've done that, we then iterate and take all our feedback and our testing into the next experiment, and you go round and round. So a prototype that you build may go through multiple evolutions as you refine it and get more and more feedback. And typically what happens if you start with a prototype that's maybe it's really scrappy and you built very quickly. As you refine it, it'll get closer and closer to that kind of production type product as well. So in terms of framing your question, obviously we've got budget and time constraints on most of our projects, right? So we can't prototype everything. But what we want to do is we want to identify the things that we want to learn, and we want to kind of focus on things that have the highest risk. So what do we feel least confident about? What are we most uncertain about? So maybe, especially in our field, right, the Dynamics platform is changing all of the time. Power Platform is changing all the time. Maybe we want to use a new feature, but we're not sure if it's going to work because we've never used it before. Our clients never used it before. So you want to prototype those sorts of things. So I guess, Copilots, building your own Copilots with Copilot Studio is probably a really good example, right? We probably want to prototype most of those before you actually go, have a solution that's fully reliant on that. And then being most misaligned. So if you've got lots of stakeholders, especially on the business side, who have different perspectives or priorities on what is the best solution, sometimes the way to bring them together is to build a prototype. And that's going back to that concept of building to communicate, so getting everyone on the same page. All right, so let's get into some examples here of prototypes and going through this question prototype test process. And here are some of the things I've built over the last year or so and questions that I've asked. So one example is maybe we want to know, does the flow of work through our solution make sense to the users? And instead of building an entire app and getting them to test it through the flow of work, you can actually just build a business process diagram with steps. And what you can do is in a workshop, you can share a business process diagram, and then you can take kind of real world scenarios and real data and just play it through that business process diagram and talk to them about it. And I find that's a really good way to prototype and test a business process. Because if you play real scenarios and real data through it, more often than likely you'll spot any missing gaps and any missing requirements you've got. So that's a really good example of a prototype which you probably didn't think was a prototype. It's just it is a tool to business process diagram to get the ideas out of your head and into a format that everyone can look at and experience and give feedback on. So I've got a few examples here. I'm going to carry on and show you a practical example of some of these. And what I want to show you is that prototyping can be super, super basic and really, really simple. And so this example here is one where the question is, what information does the user need to see? And here I've got an account form, it's blank. And then we've got all these sticky notes here in green, which is just the different types of information the user may want to see on their account form. And the way we build the prototype here is taking these sticky notes and putting them on a page. And in a workshop, you work with the users to start arrange these in an order of priority. So this person, I guess the users we may be talking to maybe are customer service representatives. So maybe the account info is probably the most important, top left. But their case history is probably the next most important, so we'll have that in the middle center. And then things like the address and contacts, probably not as important, but we're also actually quite, we want to see the activity history or their timeline here as well, so we put that at the top. And so here we've just got a way that the users can experience this. I mean, it's very basic, but it's a very quick way to build something with the users, get their input, and use that to start informing our design. And what I do like about this is this kind of quote here, right? Is And what I want to try to get across to you is that prototypes don't have to be fully functional, don't have to look nice. They just have to answer that question right. And if you share something with someone that looks really rough and is not completely finished, what you're doing is you're actually inviting people to help you design it and build that prototype as well. And that, I guess, has all sorts of benefits where they think like they're part of the solution, they're designing the solution for themselves, they're going to have a lot more buy-in, they're going to adopt it better. And so I think coming with something that's not quite finished is actually completely fine and actually a benefit for prototyping versus coming in with an app or a screen that looks like it's ready to go. And then all of a sudden you've got heaps of changes and stuff to make to it. And the users are a bit off put because they think you've designed it without them. One of the other key concepts to prototyping is iteration. So you would have seen that diagram for the process, it goes around and around the circle. And so one, I guess, example here is if you'd say designing an app interface, I recommend starting with something like a hand sketch like we've got here. Then you may go to like a digital wireframe or a mock-up, in Miro or in Figma or whatever. And then you may get to a point where you've actually started to build that solution in Power Apps here. So here we've got, as an example, a hand sketch of what this app looked like. And then we refined it over time and ended up building a Canvas Power App for it as a way of iterating on that prototype over and over again as well. And through each iteration, we took feedback from the users and incorporated that feedback into the next iteration for the prototype. Right, so now I'm going to give you a bit of background, a few examples of different prototypes. It may have changed your point of view on prototypes you've built before, and it may actually change your view of those who put themselves at the end of the scale, which was like, I don't prototype much, or don't prototype projects. It may have changed your point of view. So what I want you to do is, what are other examples or examples of prototypes that you've built before for your projects? And so maybe ones I've included already, or it could just be other ideas like and maybe even what tools do you use? And this is quite a good exercise for people to see what other people are doing as well. Yeah, love the simple Canvas apps that aren't wired up to a data source that show concepts. Yeah, it's really, if you're good at creating Canvas apps, you're an experienced Canvas app maker, quite often just going straight to a Canvas app prototype is a good approach. I like to sketch it out first because I'm just not, I'm not that quick with development. Oh, Visio and D365 stencils, yep. Excel demo forms, yep. Yeah, Excel can be a great prototyping tool just to get ideas across, especially if you want to prototype charts or dashboards or prototype views, those sorts of things. Model-driven apps. I find model-driven apps, they're really easy to build, right? And I do often use those for prototyping because it shows the client what is the end result in terms of how does a model look and feel. And it also helps them, I guess model-driven apps are quite limited in terms of what you can do, right? I think it's a good thing because it kind of helps keep the scope of the project focused. But by showing model-driven app prototypes, kind of helps educate the user on the limitations and what they can ask for and what they can't ask for and those sorts of things. Cool. Very good. Okay, let's carry on. So what I wanted to do on the model-driven app thing, I'm glad people brought this up. I just want to show you a really practical and easy way to put together a custom component within a model-driven app. So it's really easy to configure a model-driven app and do a form layout, and that's a prototype, right? But what if you need to have a custom component, whether it's a PCF control or it's an embedded canvas app or something like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some really quick and easy tools. You can do this. This is in Miro, but you can do this in any sort of digital whiteboard app. What I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the presentation. So what I recommend is if everyone goes and who's on Miro, just go and watch the screen on Teams, because I need to stop the presentation to get some extra tools in my toolbar to show. So I'm just going to stop that there, and you should be able to still see my screen on Teams. And for this example here, what we want to do is I've got an onboarding checklist I want to add to my account form. So something like this here, where it's a really simple control where I've got a bunch of checklist items. Instead of having a list of tasks that I have to click on and click close, I just want to tick the tick box and say, yep, I've done these things. And so that's probably a classic example of what a PCF control or an embedded canvas app may do. And before going away and building that, you may just want to check with the client or the stakeholders that you're on the right track with the understanding of what this checklist actually looks like. And so what I'm going to do is I've taken an out of the box account form, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Miro to quickly, within a couple of minutes, put the checklist into the app, and quickly validate with the client that this is what we're on the same page with what we're talking about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across here and I'm going to grab a shape, and I'm going to place it here on this this right hand side. This is where I want my component to go, and then I want to set the background of this. That's cool. We got a little my color picker, the same background as I've already got that Microsoft has for their background, right? So all of a sudden I've now just got a blank space to start with. Now I do want to kind of add one of these nice floating tiles on here. So I've taken the billing section from, I think that's in the details tab, and I've made copied an image of that. I did a screenshot of that. I'm actually going to bring that to front as well, and I'm going to place that here. So I've now kind of got my my nice floating tile, and I want to just get rid of the stuff on that tile. So again, I'm going to go back to my shapes and put another square over here, and I'm going to set my background to white. So now I've got like a nice nice looking tile here. It all looks like a model driven app. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some really basic Miro elements in here. So I'm just going to give it a title, checklist. I'm going to scale that down, probably about the right size here. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact or perfect. And then Miro and other tools have these kind of wireframe libraries. So I'm going to open up my wireframe library, and I'm just going to put a list on here, and I'm just going to drag it onto there. And I'm just going to resize that. It's a bit thick, and then I can do things like I can change my icon to be a tick box. I can change the color of the item, and then I can also, if I click on here, I can add new items as well and change the checkbox here to whatever icon that I want. See, Daisy, it's not right. There we go. And so all of a sudden we've got, probably maybe a bit smaller there, bold. There's something that looks like it was built into Dynamics, right? It gives a really good look and feel of what that example solution may look like as a custom component. And that took less than 5 minutes to put together, right? And then what you can do is work with the client if they want to make changes to this. You can sometimes do changes in real time if you're experienced using this. But a really quick and easy way to prototype something that looks like it would in a model-driven app, without having to go to the effort to build all of that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my presentation again inside of Miro. For those who are watching on Teams, you can come back to the Miro board, and we'll. I think what it should do is it should ask you to join my presentation again on Miro if you're joining that way. Cool. Oh, there's people. Okay. Right. So once we've built a prototype, you want to be able to get feedback from users. And there's multiple ways you can do that, right? You can just have a discussion with them and they can tell you what they like about it. One good way of getting a bit more organized with your feedback and basically kind of prompting users to think about different aspects of it is to use a thing called a feedback grid. And basically it's just kind of 4 different areas. They tell you what they like about it. They tell you what they don't like or what could be improved. They ask any questions they have about it, and then maybe offer some new ideas for you to consider for that as well. So this is a really simple, framework to use for gathering feedback. And the advantage of having your prototypes on a board like Miro is that you can get users to use sticky notes and kind of annotate the prototype as well. So I'll show you an example of that. So this is an example of a bunch of prototypes we did for a construction company. They install these piles into the ground, and these piles hold up structures and buildings and bridges and things. And they had quite a stringent Q&A process, which was done all on paper. They had a paper checklist and they'd tick things off with pen and paper. And they wanted to develop a Canvas app that they could use out on their tablets or on a mobile phone out in the field to help them with their quality assurance process. And so what we ended up building for them was an app that looked like that. It had 2 apps. It had a model-driven app and it had a Canvas app on a phone. And so here I've probably got a combination of multiple prototypes, right, where I've got the business process diagram, which they give feedback on. I've got screenshots at the, mock-ups or wireframes at the top, and they point to different sections of the business process diagram. So when we're looking at these certain steps in the business process diagram, we know this is the part of the app that we'll be looking at or using. And what we get people to do as part of this in a workshop is to take sticky notes, write on them, and then drag them across to an element that they may want to comment on and give feedback, right? And they give feedback in, maybe they like this step or they've got questions about this step or this screen or whatever. So it's a really nice visual way for everyone to give feedback. The other, the advantage of sticky notes or post-it notes is that everyone gets to have their say. It's not just one dominant person in the workshop verbally giving their feedback. So make sure it's all nice and balanced, and then you don't have to write lots of notes, right? People are writing notes for you on the sticky notes as well, and you've got all this kind of collateral to use after the workshop. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip forward. I'm going to get you to just try this out yourself as a bit of an experiment. And what I'd like you to do is to go through and write on these post-it notes and give me feedback about this workshop. So what did you like about it? What don't you like about it? What questions do you have? And what ideas do you have that could make this better? Too short. Very good. This is a massive area, right? There's so much to this, and this is a definitely just an introduction. But hopefully you picked up some things in terms of ways of prototyping, how to use tools like this one here in Miro as well. So what you're doing right now, this is what I would get to do with a client. I would get them to fill out something like this, and we'd do that for 5-10 minutes. Get them to post, stick these on top of the prototyping diagrams. And if you've done things like, say, you've created a prototype in an actual Canvas app or a model-driven app, just take screenshots and dump them into the board here. People can give them feedback that way. So they can still use those apps that you've built, and then come into a tool like this to add it on. Cool. So so this is the end of the presentation. We've got to the feedback part of it. So it's kind of the end of the prototyping cycle. So what I'll do now is we can go through some of these questions on in the blue sticky notes if you like. But if anyone else has got any questions, and I've been talking for about, 40 minutes now, so keen for other people to come off mute and speak if you'd like as well. There's probably a few questions here around what software do I use, and for sketching as well. I do everything in Miro, so that business process diagram, sketching with a pen. I've got a pen on my Surface. I do everything in Miro. I think it's an awesome tool. Business process diagrams are pretty easy to do, and then even get to the point where if you get experienced enough, you can have a business process diagram with your customers, and you can edit it in real time with them as well if you have to make adjustments. Anyone else want to come off mute and talk?
So when you have Miro, I'm assuming there is like a free and a paid version, isn't it?
Yeah, so for Miro, there is a free and a paid version. So I am paying for this. So I'm on what they call a consultant license as an independent consultant. So I think I pay $15, $20 a month for this.
Okay.
And all of my clients, everyone can come and participate for free off that one license. If you're in an enterprise, if you're in a bigger company, and you want all of your team members to have licenses, it starts adding up. It seems to be a little bit of a barrier, but what we've done for Projects Right is the company buys a couple of licenses. Those people own and manage the boards, and then everyone else enters as a guest, and that works really well. As a guest, you're limited in what you can do in terms of it's really hard to facilitate use these facilitated experiences, but as long as whoever is facilitating the workshop and guiding people through, as long as they've got a license, that's probably the easiest thing, and everyone else can just participate as guests. Yeah, and they're free.
Sounds good.
Charles, get your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering about if you have people grabbing sticky notes and then typing them out, do you ask them to create accounts first so that you have a record as to who's talked about what, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, interesting. I'm never too concerned about who writes what. I think you can, under each note, I mean, you've got metadata which tells you who wrote it, and I can see all of your names. It's all visiting something rather than you're all anonymous. I know I don't think it really makes a difference whether I know who wrote the note or not, to be honest, sometimes. And I quite like the anonymous side of things because it means people are free to speak their mind, right? Especially if you've got like a manager or someone quite senior in the room. It can be quite intimidating. People are reluctant to put down their ideas and speak truthfully. So yeah, but you can get people to create an account ahead if you want them to, and then if you click on a note, I think you can, what is it? You can show the author of the notes if you really wanted to track who's doing what. Yeah.
I think it's a great point about keeping it anonymous. I was just thinking about from the perspective of some people are not very good at communicating exactly what they want. So they might write something down and you're reading it and thinking, I'm really not sure what you mean by that. So then, of course, you need them to come forwards and explain it.
Yeah, and that's usually, I mean, the way these exercises work, right, is we go through, write down sticky notes, and then we'll all review them, and I get a chance, people can ask questions on, if you see a sticky note that you're not sure about what it means, you're allowed to speak up and say, hey, can someone please clarify? So that's usually that, and that usually pulls people, people will be like, oh, yep, I wrote that one. What I mean by that is such and such, and then you can go in and edit it and make it a bit clearer.
Or they could stay anonymous and keep typing in it.
Well, they could do that too, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, what I like about this is, right, you're just using different ways of interacting with people. Some people like to speak and talk. Some people like to write notes. I mean, I've even been in workshops like this where people refuse to write on the notes. Like, I can't use this tool. It's too difficult. And so, like, okay, well, you tell me what your ideas are, and I'll write them down for you. And that works fine as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. It's very cool.
Cool.
It keeps people engaged, doesn't it? Because if you're having a traditional meeting where people are talking, there's only one person who can talk at a time. Whereas with this, everyone can just spill all of their ideas at the same time, which is very handy.
Yeah, it's super efficient, really efficient from the point of view of you collect a lot of information at once, but also you don't have to write heaps of notes, as the facilitator or, as someone who usually writes lots of notes. I've actually got quite lazy now. I don't write a lot of notes and basically say if it's not on the board here, it's not going to be captured. But obviously you've got transcripts as well, obviously through recordings too, which is super useful. And what I've been working with a lot recently is using Copilot to go through a transcript and go, hey, we can do with Miro actually is you can select a bunch of stickies and you can go, okay, hey, here are some stickies we've collected on the things that people like about this prototype. Here's our meeting transcript. Have I missed anything? And then Miro will go and automatically generate sticky notes based on the transcript. It's some pretty cool little tools you can use now around using AI to gather that sort of information from transcripts rather than him to write lots of notes.
Is that AI in Miro or AI in Copilot?
Yeah, I use both, but there is AI in Miro. Cool. It's really quite cool. So you can get little bots to create sticky notes for you and come up with ideas. But for that, you definitely need a license, right? You need to be a licensed user for that, which makes sense. Yeah. Carl, you got your hand up. Oh, you're on mute, mate.
There we go. Okay, quick question. So as you said, you don't have to take notes because everybody's really making your notes for you. And then once you're done, I'm assuming you can share this in some sort of slide deck or something with the kind of the VPs and things that may want copies of this, or how's that work?
Yeah, no, very good. So what you can do is, what I'll do is I'm going to stop share. I'm going to stop the presentation in Miro. If you look at my screen share on Teams, you'll see here I've got everything set up in these little what we call frames, but each of these frames are the same size as like a presentation page in a Microsoft PowerPoint. And what I can do is I can just literally go, was it board, export, and I can go save as PDF. And basically for each frame, it creates as a PDF page. So if you're smart and you lay out your board like this, it's super easy to print it off and give it as a presentation, for an executive or something. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, good. And if you want to see the AI stuff here, I mean, there's a classic example here is I can maybe select all these and go create with AI, and you can do things like create sticky notes, write user stories. I mean, it's those actually work quite well. You can get user stories written, but yeah, let's do things like maybe I want to create a document, a retrospective summary of what because this is what we've done here is kind of like a retrospective in a way, a bit of a feedback summary, and so you can prompt it to write a document, and if I go say generate document, it's doing it based on the selected items here. And it's pretty amazing. And you could then give this to an executive, right? Here's my summary from the workshop. And put that into a Word document. It's pretty, if you look at that, it's not too bad in terms of putting together some good output. So, AI is definitely a tool I'm using a lot. With this as well, because one of the hurdles to using a tool like this is that you've got all this information, like what do you do with it? It takes a lot of time to process it all, but AI is definitely coming a long way to making it so really quick and easy to process a lot of information. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Anyone else wants to come off mute? I'm just looking at some of these questions here. Resources for watching someone do prototyping sessions with a client. Don't actually know if there's anything. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there's heaps of kind of courses around prototyping, but not running at the exact, an example of running with a client. Maybe it's something I could produce for people. This one here, if you weren't competent with Power Platform, would you include solution architect developer to prototype? Yeah, for sure. So, Huber, it doesn't have to be you who's building the prototype. You could get someone else to build it for you. You could just to facilitate this whole discussion as well, right? And a lot of the time, these sorts of exercises, prototyping, gathering feedback, they actually may include multiple people, teams of people. So I've been on a project recently where the team building a prototype, and my role was literally just to facilitate the workshops and the feedback and do the demonstrations, but I didn't touch any of the tools. And that was on quite a very large project. The prototyping was a key part of it, and we had a team of like I said, prototypes got quite involved because they were Canvas apps, but you don't have to do all of this yourself as well. Definitely work as a team. Figma is the Figma and doing user research. Yeah, I mean it's very similar, right, to using Figma. Figma obviously I think can get better prototypes in terms of how they look and they feel. Miro is a bit limited, but I guess I don't mind that. But definitely I've used Figma before as part of the user research too. So I'm thinking, see the double diamond approach. Yep, so the double diamond approach is like another design thinking diagram. I use that, I refer to it a lot actually. Really good to set the scene with people around kind of how they should be thinking. Are you in the problem zone? Are you coming up with heaps of different ideas, or are you trying to choose ideas? Or are you working on the solution, vice versa? So for those who don't know the double diamond, have a I might actually be able to share a link to a blog post I've got on it, but it's a very powerful tool. Okay. Do you have any good tools to help upskilling prototyping? As I said, I've got a course. I don't really want to do it as a sales pitch, but I do have a course to help with prototyping. But there are other kind of good courses online through companies like IDOU. There's the International the Interactive Design Federation or something. They have lots of good courses and tools and stuff as well. But I was laughing at this one here, New Zealand and Australia, New Zealand, the same country. No, they're not. They're not. Definitely not. No, and there is a bit of a rivalry between the two countries. Lots of sporting rivalry. There's always lots of jokes around how Australia steals stuff from New Zealand. It's a friendly rivalry between the two countries. So yeah, you'd never want to call a New Zealander an Aussie, and probably vice versa. And the last two questions here: do you use eye tracker? I think I don't use it, no. But I think, is that a tool where you can see someone looking at a screen and you can track where their eyes are going? Did someone want to tell us more about that? It sounds quite interesting.
I don't know who wrote the question, but yeah, that is the right kind of tool. So I think you'd be looking at finding out where someone's looking on the screen to see where they look first, second, third, and it helps you to understand what flow you'll get from someone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never used that
really
either.
Cool. Yeah. It just sounds a bit quite advanced for me. So yeah, what I'm showing you today are very simple techniques, right? But yeah, that's another level for usability, right? For sure.
Yeah, with the Miro and Figma side of things, the way that I would look at it is that Miro is for the earlier feedback phase, and then Figma is where you've got your designs and you're fine-tuning everything, and you're really getting to the end product. That's the way that I feel about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially if you're doing external facing stuff, like if you're doing a portal or a website, it's actually easier to do that in Figma, right? It's got all the very fine touch details which you need for especially for a customer facing type thing like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And just because you use one tool doesn't mean you can't use the other, right? I've been in a project recently where we use Miro and Figma together. Yeah.
Actually,
that does. Point. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. That does bring up a question, which is, do you or have you ever tried any kind of integration between Miro and Power Platform for any reason? Like, I don't even know if there's a Power Platform connector for Miro or anything like that. Like, I suppose if you think about the user stories, so it can generate user stories. If you wanted to get those into Azure DevOps, you would export them into a spreadsheet and then paste them in or publish them?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is a connector by default between Miro and the Miro and Jira. I think they've teamed up quite closely, and then there's a Miro and Azure DevOps connector as well. But you have to have, for the Azure DevOps one, you need to have like an enterprise license, which costs a lot. So what I do is I hear me okay?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Headphones just telling me I'm running out of battery. I can't afford the enterprise license. So what I do is I still have my user stories in Azure DevOps, and I kind of just manually maintain them between the two. But what I often will do is have like a little sticky note or a card in Miro, which is the Azure DevOps number, and then I'll plot. So one of the other things I do for prototype is plot the user stories on the business process map, so you can see how they all link together and what their dependencies are, and which is quite useful when you're writing, say, acceptance criteria. And if you're using the given, when, then format, you can go, well, given what is the previous thing has happened, what happens next. So I put the Azure DevOps number on the sticky note so that you can just easily look it up in Azure DevOps if you want the more details. It's a little bit time consuming, but I think it still works. Yeah, it works really well. And then you've got that kind of visual link between Miro and Azure DevOps. And if I've got, say, prototypes or screenshots, I'll just screenshot it and paste it into the Azure DevOps item with a link to Miro for the details. Yeah.
That's cool. I like it. All right, I better wrap up because we've gone over the time a little bit. But it's been really good, really interesting. I feel like you could easily do a part 2 for this session and take it a step further, and people would love it. So thank you so much for your time. And I'll just wrap up. So got a couple of things to mention. I need to just make sure that I'm not going to share your Miro board. Instead, I'm going to share what I mean to share. So we have an event that's coming up. It's not from our user group, but it's a combination of user groups. So there's not much to see here at the moment, but essentially lots of different user groups and community members are getting together on the 17th of December. And this time is my time, so it will be the 18th of December in Australasia and Asia. But yeah, I mean, I can provide this a link to this in the chat. And essentially, it's going to be different user groups talking about different parts of Power Platform and also just having fun and basically a celebration of the year and just having a nice time together. So that's coming up on the 17th of December. And then for our user group, if I share the PowerPoint, I can show you our next event. So of course, every month we have it on the 11th, but for Australia, New Zealand, and for most of Asia, if not all of Asia, it will be the day after. So it'll be the 12th. So it'll be the 12th of January there. But then, the 11th, actually, India still manages to make it into the 11th. So next month's call is going to be based around Power Pages. So that'll be a really interesting one because we haven't covered Power Pages yet. And it will be focusing on accessibility from Ambesh, and then it will be focusing on UI, UX, and accessibility from Franco. And I've seen many of Franco's presentations before, and he's an absolute legend when it comes to Power Pages. It's going to be very, very interesting. Really looking forward to that one. So that's that. And then finally, just wanted to say thank you to everyone, to Hamish, to Dani for recording his video, even though he couldn't make it, and for everyone who's attended. And if you want to provide feedback, then there's a QR code for that. And of course, this will be uploaded to YouTube, ideally within the next 24 hours. And if you want to view any parts of our user group, then there's a link there, Linktree, and you can get to all the different groups. So we're on LinkedIn. Of course, we have a Twitter or an X account. We also have a Blue Sky account. I think we're probably changing over to Blue Sky. And yeah, you can find us over the majority of the social medias. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And depending on your time zone, have a lovely morning, afternoon, or night.